Dr. Joel Fuhrman is a board-certified physician whose groundbreaking work has been acclaimed as a medical breakthrough for weight loss, disease reversal, and prevention.
The American diet today has 62% of calories from processed foods. How many of you would like a promise that you don't have to have a heart attack when you get older?
He's a New York Times best-selling author and a widely published nutritional researcher.
And I see people putting this into practice every day, transforming their lives. Never forget that your health is your greatest wealth.
Join Dr. Joel Fuhrman now and learn the 3 steps to incredible health.
Welcome to Win the War on Cancer. I'm Dr. Joel Fuhrman, and I'm here today to tell you that we can win the war on cancer. You know, cancer affects a large percentage of the modern world today, and it's been increasing over the last 100 years in all over the world. And here's the thing. It's what you eat in your childhood that has a large effect on what kind of cancer and if you're going to get cancer later on in life. The point here is that when you eat foods that are more obesity and weight promoting, and you eat high calorie, low nutrient food in your childhood, that sets the stage for damage to your body later on in life. When you get cancer at the age of 60 or 70, it didn't really occur from what you ate in those 5 or 10 years prior to when the cancer was diagnosed. It was more related to what you ate earlier in life. So we found out with studies on animals and human studies that when people eat more foods that promote rapid growth, like a diet style higher in animal products and higher in processed foods, we accelerate the growth of the animal, and the faster the animal grows, the faster it matures. And the faster it's maturing, the higher the risk of cancer later on in life. For example, a woman's increased risk of breast cancer can be measured or documented by the age she went through puberty. The average age of a woman's first menstrual period in 1840 was age 17 and a half. Yet today in America, it's age 12. As we eat these diets that promote earlier maturity and more rapid growth, we see cancer rates increase proportionally. What we're looking for here is people to grow more moderately and to grow more slowly. Because in this country, we had the impression that it was favorable for our children to get bigger and stronger and get bigger faster, and now we're finding out that that's not ideal. So let me say this one more time. I'm saying susceptibility to carcinogenesis, the causes of cancer, is highest in childhood. And that's where eating the wrong foods, the children-friendly foods, right? The chicken fingers, the fried foods, the French fries, the fried cheese sandwiches, the pizzas, all the unhealthy foods, all the junk foods, the sodas we give our kids, may be a form of child abuse. Because allowing children to eat all that junk food when they're young could increase their susceptibility dramatically to cancers when they get older. And of course, it also increases their susceptibility and development of heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity later in life. You know, when the atomic bomb went off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end World War II, those people exposed to radiation had a 500% increased risk of cancer that occurred 40 to 50 years later. There's a big lag time between exposure to a carcinogen and the actual development of cancer. We have to be careful here. We have to improve the health of our whole population if we're going to win the war on cancer. Now, as you know, people think getting bigger is better, but we know that the shortest lived people are the people who are like the linebackers on football team. They have 6 times the early cardiac death as the general population. And the general population still is at an increased risk. So we're talking here that being big and muscular is not the example of being healthy and living a long time. Because to get that big, they had to maybe take steroids or maybe to eat a diet that wasn't that healthy to get that unnaturally large. So we have to be careful here. We're looking to have our children grow slower and get out of our mind this idea that being big is always better, right? My son is such a good eater. You know, or my child's doesn't look like they're eating enough, so I'm going to give them like more candy or more ice cream or more soda, something to get them to eat more. Parents are always looking at their child, trying to think if the child's eating enough to entice them with something to get them to eat more so they can get bigger. The Boyd-Orr study and a lot of other studies, fascinating studies done, showing that when children eat more fruit, later on in life they have dramatically reduced risk of cancer. So in general, as children eat more natural foods, fruits and vegetables, their adult lives get protected for cancer. And as children eat more animal products and processed foods and more refined sugar and white flour, we see more later life cancers. And that's what the epidemiologic studies show too. When we study populations of people, that people who eat more unrefined plant food have dramatic protection. More fruits, more vegetables, more beans, more onions, more mushrooms, more nuts and seeds. As people eat more of these natural plant foods, cancer rates go down. And as they eat more processed foods than Americans are eating, as they eat more white flour, oil, sugar, animal products, cheese, eggs, as they eat more animal products and processed foods, cancers go up. We're just not eating right in America. We're not realizing the therapeutic implication of what we eat. And you know what? Since we know that what we eat in the first half of our life can cause more damage when we regard to cancer than what we eat in the second half of our life, right? Since we know that's true, since we know that breast and prostate cancer, the improper diet in the first half is a bigger contribution of cause than what we eat in our second half. Now that's why it's so important you know about superfoods and eat the anti-cancer foods. Because not all of us ate that healthy when we were kids. You're 50 years old, you're 45, you're 65, and you feel, uh-oh, is it too late for me? I'm going to have to get cancer because I ate wrong? Well, here's the thing. We're learning now that certain foods have such powerful therapeutic properties that they could actually intercede and repair the broken crosslinks that may have occurred in your childhood. They could repair that damage that would have led to cancer if you didn't eat the high consumption of these types of superfoods. And let me describe some of them to you. Because we're talking, these superfoods are green vegetables, especially those in the family called cruciferous green vegetables. The cruciferous family are vegetables like broccoli and cabbage and kale and bok choy and Brussels sprouts and arugula and watercress. So there's these green vegetables contain a compound called isothiocyanates. Type in ITC in a medical search engine, and you'll see a flood of studies showing the dramatic protective effects of ITCs against all types of cancer. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, stomach cancer, colon cancer, right? And there's especially looking at the epidemiologic studies on raw vegetables show a powerful and consistent association with all types of cancers. We're saying here that not only do these nutrients from green vegetables enable cellular repair mechanisms to take toxins out of the cells and to fix cells that were damaged in our youth, right, to reduce cancer risks, but also they have the effect to prevent the expression of genes that promote cancer. So if you have cancer like colon cancer that runs in your family or breast cancer that runs in your family, that they show when you give these people a high intake of these green vegetables, it prevents the expression of these genes, and you can still dramatically lower the risk of cancer, even in those people that are genetically prone to cancer. The point here is, eat a vegetable-based diet. Eat lots of green vegetables. Think of making salads every day, and every day have a serving of some other green vegetable beside a salad. Have some broccoli, have some kale, and have a bok choy dish with mushroom and onions. We can make these vegetables taste delicious. When we look at the studies, and a study published in the medical journal Carcinogenesis showed that there was about a 57% reduced colon cancer occurrence in people who ate a high consumption of cruciferous vegetables, these green vegetables, compared to people with a low consumption. And let me tell you this, that the high consumption of cruciferous vegetables shown in this study that reduced colon cancer by 57% is much less than the amount of vegetables I recommend people consume, because their high consumption wasn't that high, right? Now, let's look at the study for a minute on mushrooms and cancer, because mushrooms protect against all types of cancer, but they're especially protective against breast cancer. The recent study published in the journal, International Journal of Cancer, showed that women who ate mushrooms on a regular basis had a 64% lower risk of cancer. Can you imagine? If there was a drug that can reduce breast cancer by 64%, wouldn't that drug be like a $1 billion drug and every woman would be paying $300 a month to take this medication? How come we know that one little mushroom a day reduces breast cancer by 64%? Why doesn't all women in America know that? Wouldn't you think that they should have been told that? But here's the kicker, because the same study showed that women who ate the mushrooms and they also ate green vegetables or green tea with the mushroom every day, had an 89% reduced risk of cancer. And mushrooms don't just happen, they're not just rich in nutrients and low in calories, but they have these factors called aromatase inhibitors, which help the body rid itself of excess hormones or excess estrogen that can cause cancer, or that can promote cancer. And they also have something in them called angiogenesis inhibitors that prevent the abnormal growth of endothelial cells to feed tumors. The tumors can't get fed and they die off. There's a word called apoptosis, which means the destruction and death of cancer cells in your body. We're saying here that even if the body already developed a cancer cell, the body's immune system still has the ability to recognize, identify, and kill that cell to prevent it from spreading and becoming cancer. And the factors in mushrooms facilitate that and prevent those cells from being fed so they can't multiply and have to die off, and the immune system can attack them. So even if you were at a heightened risk of cancer, and even if you promoted cancer formation because of your bad diet for the first half of your life, it doesn't mean you can't protect yourself now and can't undo some of that damage. You can, but you have to eat the right foods to arm your body with the ability to do so. Now let's consider onions in cancer, because onions are a superfood too. There was a recent study published in the medical journal, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And these studies tracked 12 countries all through Europe, seeing what foods in particular were linked to lowest rates of cancer. And they found onions and green vegetables reduced cancer. And the people who were in the highest consumption of onions had a 56% reduction in colon cancer, a 73% reduction in ovarian cancer, right? A 71% reduction in prostate cancer. The consumption of onions has dramatic protection against cancer. But here's the thing. Those numbers I just mentioned, those people, compared to the amount of onions I recommend people consume, still wasn't as much onions. You can get even more percentage of that. Now what if, just what if, you had a diet style that combined the benefits of onions with the benefits of mushrooms, with the cruciferous green vegetables, all in the same diet? Well, if onions alone give you over 50% protection against cancers, and mushrooms alone give you a protection, and green vegetables alone give you protection, what if you mix all these things together? We can get dramatic protection. We have to teach our population this information. Now, it's kind of fascinating information how it works, because in the green vegetables, like the broccoli, the anti-cancer compounds aren't there when it's sitting in your refrigerator. They're not there yet. You have to chew or cut the vegetable first, because as you chew the vegetable, it causes the cell wall to release an enzyme, and the enzyme catalyzes a reaction that forms a lot of these anti-cancer compounds as you're chewing. Let me give you an example with the onion. It's easier to think about this with an onion because onion has an enzyme called allanase inside. And when you cut the onion, the enzyme catalyzes a reaction that makes these sulfenic acids, like sulfuric acid, that causes your eyes to burn. You know how you cut an onion, your eyes tear, right? Well, as your eyes are tearing and that chemical reaction is occurring in your kitchen, you're actually forming chemical compounds that prevent cancer. You're forming these disulfides and trifluorides that have beneficial anti-cancer effects. So if you take that red onion and put it in your salad and you chew it up well, you're forming anti-cancer compounds in your mouth. As you're chewing and crushing the cells, you're creating a chemical reaction in your mouth and you're forming more anti-cancer compounds. So the better you chew that onion up, the better you crush those cells, the better medicinal, the better health effects that's going to occur. Now the enzyme allanase that catalyzes this reaction to create these anti-cancer compounds is heat sensitive. So if I took the onion and I didn't cut it up, and I put the whole onion into my soup and cooked it, and after it's cooked, I cut it up, it wouldn't form all those anti-cancer compounds. You wouldn't get the full benefit from the onion. If you're going to put the onion in the soup, chop it up small first, cause the chemical reaction to occur. Or better yet, put it in the blender, like a high-powered blender, and put some green vegetables in there too. Add a little bit of water, put a little fluid from the soup in there and turn it on. Blend it up. Give off that smell. Right? You stink up your kitchen with that odor, then pour it into the soup while it was still raw, because the heat from the soup won't destroy the anti-cancer compounds, but the heat could have impeded the formation of those anti-cancer compounds. Are you following this? Because it's an important concept, because the same thing is true with the green vegetables. Because if we're cooking green vegetables in the soup, like kale and collards and bok choy, and that these are very powerful anti-cancer foods. And to maximize the anti-cancer potential, we don't want to deactivate the myrosinase enzyme that forms the ITCs. Remember I mentioned the isothiocyanates, the ITCs that are so powerful against cancer? We want to chew our broccoli really well. We don't want to overcook it. We want to steam it lightly. When we're making cooked greens into the soups, better to puree or chop them fine before adding them to the soup to maximize the production of those anti-cancer compounds. Now, onions give us flavonoids, chromium, disulfides and trisulfides. They don't just protect you against cancer. They're also protective against heart disease. They also lower blood sugar. They also have the angiogenesis inhibitors that produce fat to atrophy and melt off your body. Don't underestimate the power of using onions in your cooking, right? Put them on your salads. In the study that I mentioned earlier, they studied the consumption of onions in 71 countries, and they found that the consumption of beans and onions and soybeans actually showed reduced rates of cancers dramatically. And of course, animal foods, milk, sugar, alcohol, and stimulant drugs increase cancer rates. So we want to, and the more you eat the healthy foods, the more you avoid the use of medications and drugs that may increase the risk of cancer. I remember the first lecture I heard in medical school when the teacher told us that don't ever forget that all drugs are toxic. They don't work because they're nutrition. They work because they poison or interfere with some natural body process. But people get out, the medical doctors get out into practice, and they forget that because they only have to work with is drugs. They don't really spend the time to teach people about nutrition because unfortunately they're not well trained in this. And I'm saying right now that nutrition and the power of natural foods is the most powerful therapeutic intervention for most medical conditions. And we're talking here about powerful foods like green vegetables, mushrooms, and onions. But tomatoes, too, we have to mention, are dramatically protective against prostate cancer and breast cancer. When we measure the lycopene level in people's bloodstream, and lycopene is a marker of how much tomatoes are eaten, because lycopene is the carotenoid that makes tomatoes red, and makes red peppers red, and makes watermelon red. So all those foods that are, red grapefruit, everything has lycopene, that red color. And the lycopene has an effect, or the foods high in lycopene, to reduce the risk of pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer. It's not just prostate cancer. But there's a lot of studies showing a dramatic reduction in prostate cancer from the high intake of tomatoes. So so we want to include those in our diet too. And cooked tomato products, like tomato sauces, and when you mix tomato sauce with garlic and onions and mushrooms, wow, that's a super anti-cancer food. How about let's have some bok choy or broccoli rabe with roasted garlic with tomatoes and mushrooms and onions. Let's have some of that for dinner tonight, right? That's really great stuff. And you're eating stuff that tastes delicious and protecting you against disease. Now, we're talking here that the plant cell, look at the plant cell for a minute, because in the cell wall is this enzyme I'm talking about called myrosinase. And this is the enzyme that makes these powerful anti-cancer compounds in green vegetables. And most people, when they eat these things, they don't chew them very well. And so chewing well is important, especially when we're talking about eating these anti-cancer compounds. I'm bringing this up to you so you know that you have to chew the vegetables as well as you can to get the maximum anti-cancer benefits. Because I'm saying again that all the anti-cancer compounds aren't in the vegetable until you've chewed it, and they're formed in the mouth as you're breaking down the cell wall. All right, so you understand the importance of that again? Now, the glucosinolates go look back at that slide again. The glucosinolates is that G in the middle. The glucosinolates gets converted by the myrosinase enzyme into the isothiocyanates. And we could measure glucosinolate intake and what people are eating, and the glucosinolate intake around the world correlates impeccably well with the rate of cancer in those populations, right? Populations with low glucosinolate intake have high rates of cancer. Higher glucosinolate intake, low rates of cancer. In America, we have a very low intake of green vegetable consumption. In Japan, they eat about 8 times as much green vegetables, so they have more of these anti-cancer compounds than we do. And thus, we see lower cancer effects. Of course, we're exporting American way of life all over the world, so people are eating less vegetables in some of these areas, but my recommended glucosinolate intake is still 3 times as much as in Japan. In other words, when we look at the highest areas to get dramatic cancer protection, I'm saying we should eat even more than that, because the studies on animals in the laboratory, in the Brasaka laboratory at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and a lot of these studies show that to get the levels up high enough of green vegetables, that to get the dramatic protection against cancer that we really need to get, for especially people who haven't eaten healthy the first half of their life, we have to eat larger portions of green vegetables and eat them both raw and cooked. Now, a recent study showed that alpha-carotene and lutein in the blood were dramatically increased longevity in humans. In other words, these studies show that people with the highest level of alpha-carotene had lived longer and had a dramatic reduction in all-cause death compared to people with a low level of serum alpha-carotene. The reason alpha-carotene is shown to be so protective is because people don't take supplements with alpha-carotene. The higher level of alpha-carotene in the blood is representative of how much vegetables people are eating. It's a marker for vegetable intake, whereas beta-carotene could mark what they're getting in a vitamin pill. And you know what? Beta-carotene from vitamin pills have been shown to increase cancer rates. Not beta-carotene from food, but beta-carotene from supplements. What I'm saying here is we can't fool Mother Nature. We can't think we're going to take some of these things from vitamin pills and have the same effects of getting the broad spectrum of phytochemicals that are present in natural foods. Likewise, beans are full of phenols and beneficial effects, and the studies on soybeans show that they have dramatic protective effects against breast cancer, especially when women eat foods like edamame and tofu, that as they eat natural soy foods, they show dramatic reductions in breast cancer and hormonally sensitive cancers. So we know how to design a diet that's actually cancer protective because mushrooms, onions, garlic, soy, cinnamon, berries, green vegetables have these angiogenesis inhibitors in them that help you lose weight and prevent cancer at the same time. Just like the angiogenesis inhibitors prevent the abnormal growth of red blood cells from growing into feeding fat cells, they also feed tumors, right? So it's the same factor, it's the same thing going on here. It's making tumors melt away or unable to grow, just like these factors are making your fat unable to grow. So the trick here, going back for a second, is when you eat mushrooms, onions, garlic, soy, cinnamon, berries, and greens, when you eat those foods, it helps you lose weight. You're eating foods that accelerate and help the weight fall off your body as it's protecting cancer at the same time. Also, it's important to avoid foods that can promote cancer, right? Animal fats, animal protein, promote especially processed meats and barbecued meats and red meats are cancer promoting. A lot of studies now are showing that the highest intake of saturated fat more than doubles the risk of pancreatic cancer. A lot of studies are showing that the higher rates of red meats and processed meats dramatically increase the risk of colon cancer and other cancers. And what's really interesting here is that we're finding that it's not just the fat in the meat that accelerates the cancer. It's also the animal protein. That means that even things like egg whites and white meat chicken increases a hormone called IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1. And the highest levels of insulin-like growth factor 1 are significant risk factors for prostate cancer and breast cancer. So we want to reduce our consumption of animal products, of course, dramatically reduce the most dangerous ones, especially processed meats and red meats. Nevertheless, the studies on prostate cancer in men show that as men consume more dairy products, they have higher rates of prostate cancer. And the higher fat dairy products were not as bad as the lower fat dairy products were, because the lower fat dairy products have more protein in them. And it's that particular protein that's in dairy products seems to be sensitizing to men with prostate cancer. Now we actually have examples of trials where Dr. Ornish did a study where he took men who had early stages of prostate cancer and put them on a diet high in vegetables, and they found their PSAs dropped, and it showed that it extended their lifespan, and it had other effects to show that their prostate cancer was halted in its tracks, right? So we have lots of evidence to know that even in the early stages of cancer, we can stop the rapid growth, and in many cases, cause those cancers to go back to a more normal state again. Also, when we eat more animal products in our diet, especially when we eat too much animal products, especially when we combine the excessive consumption of animal products with processed foods that raise insulin, like sugar and white flour, when we do these things, it increases our white blood cell count because it makes more inflammation in the body. And they found out in these studies that people who had a higher white blood cell count had a higher rate of cancer and a shortened lifespan. And the more meat you eat and the more processed foods you eat, the more inflammation, the more it raises a marker of inflammation called CRP, called C-reactive protein, and it also raises your white blood cell counts. And the reason I'm telling you this, it's important. I'm telling you this because when you eat this healthy diet, high in vegetables and beans and berries and fruits, your white blood cell count will drop. And it will drop so low that it will drop out of the normal range. Because you might go to your doctor, and your doctor takes your blood test, and he says, something's wrong here. Your white blood cell count's too low. The normal range is between 5 and 10, and yours is 3 or 4. Let me tell you something. That's a good sign, not a bad sign. What I'm saying is the whole normal range of 5 to 10 is abnormal, because the normal range should be like 2 to 8, not 5 to 10 or 2 to 6. Because we're looking at what's normal is where Americans lie, and the whole American, that outlying effect of the bell-shaped curve is shifted over. So I'm telling you this because in case your white blood cell count is below normal, it's not bad. Because we see this in all the people following this high nutrient diet. We see their white blood cell counts drop, and we have the scientific evidence to show that a dropped or a lower white blood cell count is an incredible marker to predict longer life and dramatic protection against cancer. Let's review a little bit about supplements here, because you may know that people have been taking supplements for more than 50 years. Actually, scientists discovered those vitamins and minerals back in 1930, and between 1935 and 1940, people were already taking vitamin supplements. And it's good when people were found to be deficient, when people had scurvy because they had no vitamin C, taking vitamin C, was a good idea. But now nutritional science has advanced. And we know that food gives us a broad spectrum of nutrients that you can't find in the inside of a vitamin pill bottle. But we're finding out that some of these vitamins, especially some of these synthetic vitamins, are not healthy to take. Take vitamin A. It's called the Cochrane analysis. It was a meta-analysis study that was done in Europe. And they pooled together hundreds of studies on people taking vitamin A supplements over years. And they found that people who took vitamin A on a regular basis had double the risk of hip fracture and a dramatic increased risk of cancer. Matter of fact, people who took vitamin A just for 3 or 4 years had a 16% increased risk of cancer. That means taking vitamin A is pretty dangerous. When we get our vitamin A by eating foods like carrots and green vegetables, we get the precursors called carotenoids. The body makes the vitamin A how much it needs from those carotenoid precursors. But when we take vitamin A in a supplement, we overshoot, and the body can't control the amount, and it has an effect to cause risks, cause dangers. We're talking here the fact that we're protecting yourself against cancer. You don't want to get some of these nutrients from supplements. You want to get them from real food. So avoid vitamin A, avoid beta-carotene, in supplemental form, that is. You want to get it from food. Now, so beta-carotene shows an increased mortality. That increased mortality means an increased risk of death from people taking beta-carotene on a regular basis. Vitamin E, people taking 200 to 800 IUs of vitamin E had a 4% increased mortality. Not as bad as beta-carotene and not as bad as vitamin A, which was the worst, but still taking vitamin E was not beneficial for people. Now just think about this for a minute. Because you can't, 200 to 400 IUs of vitamin E, you can't get that much from food. That's an abnormal amount. A healthy diet only gives you about 20 to 30 IUs. So we're talking here 10 times as much as people get from natural food. It can't be that good to take a nutrient, increase it 10 or 20-fold, and take it in a synthetic form and think it's going to protect us. It's good when we get these nutrients from real food is the point. Another good example is folate versus folic acid. You know how that when you're pregnant, that doctors and authorities, health authorities recommend people take folic acid. Why do they do that? Because they found that people's blood levels were low in folate could cause birth defects and other problems in children. But instead of telling women to eat more green vegetables to get folate, we give them a pill. And the pill's like a permission slip not to eat green vegetables now. If we never told people to eat the pill, we could have told women how important it was to eat green vegetables. Now here's what I'm saying here. I'm saying folate is not the same thing as folic acid. Folic acid is synthetic, and it's not the same compound as folate. It's so important to understand this principle, because now we find out that there's lots of evidence from scientific studies to show that people who take folic acid have an increased risk of breast cancer and an increased risk of prostate cancer. There was even a study that followed women 30 years after their pregnancies, and it found that women who took the folic acid during their pregnancy had a higher rate of breast cancer down the road than women who didn't take the folic acid. I'm not saying it's good to be deficient in folate, but I'm saying that we need to get our folate from real food, from vegetables. And people whose bloodstream is high in folate have a lower rate of cancer if it comes from vegetables. If it comes from folic acid, it increases the risk of cancer. There was one study that showed that men who took folic acid supplements increased their risk of prostate cancer by 167%, right? So these are important things to know about how important vitamin supplements can play a role, because the right vitamin supplements can protect you and the wrong vitamin supplements can hurt you. Vitamin D is a good issue, a good point, because vitamin D deficiency is ubiquitous across America. We have an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency, and the low rate of vitamin D can dramatically increase risk of cancer. There's some studies out now that show that people in the lowest quartile of vitamin D consumption, that means they're deficient in vitamin D, have a 78% increase of all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality means you're dying at higher rates you have higher rates of cancer, but also high rates of heart attack, high rates of stroke, right? High rates of hip fracture. People are dying because of vitamin D deficiency. And some of us that live in northern climates who don't work in outdoors need more vitamin D. So it's very important to get a blood test and to supplement with vitamin D if you don't have the opportunity to live your life outdoors or get enough sunshine. We're finding out that vitamin D is one of the most powerful anti-cancer substances in history. Remember I told you earlier that if you eat badly as a child, it could dramatically increase risk of cancer later on? Well, here's something that says the opposite of that, contradicts that. Because they did a study where they gave women vitamin D, and within 4 years, the women taking vitamin D had a 50% reduction in the diagnosis of breast cancer. That's in just 4 years' time. Now, breast cancer, by the time it can be diagnosed, to be large enough to be seen by the human eye, that cancer had to have been there more than 10 years. If vitamin D supplements started to reduce the incidence of cancer within 4 years, that means it was causing some cells that were already dysplastic and already cancerous to be reversed back to normal again. That means vitamin D has a powerful anti-cancer substance that can even cause reversal of cancers that are already in your body, right? And think about this when you're considering that more than half of Americans are deficient in it. Now, but when we're considering vitamin D, recognize here that we have a lot of Americans are deficient, and some may be taking too much, because the studies seem to indicate that both too much and too little could be harmful. So in other words, there's an ideal range in the blood of vitamin D adequacy. And that ideal range in the blood is most likely between 30 and 55. 30 and 55, and the right blood test is called the vitamin D 25-hydroxy. That's the blood test you want your doctor to order for you. And you want to gauge the amount of supplements you take to have that ideal range in your blood. You just don't want to think taking more is better and overdose on it either. And for most people need between 1,000 and 3,000 a day to get their IUs of vitamin D, if they're not out in the sun all the time, to get the ideal level in that narrow range. So the controversy, it's vitamin D, how much to take is still a controversy. Some people recommend more and recommend less. My guidelines, right in the middle, looking at the meta-analysis, right? But you want to remember here that a lot of people think that high-dose calcium is the answer for protecting their bones. And we're finding out now that too much calcium with the vitamin D can actually weaken bones. That you want to take the right amount of calcium. You want to eat a lot of green vegetables and eat right. And you could supplement with a little bit, 300 to 600, 300 to 800, around 600 milligrams of calcium is okay, but a lot of women are taking 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. They're taking huge amounts of calcium, thinking more is better, and it has negative effects. And it may have more negative effects than we even learned at this point, because the super high-dose calcium that so many women are doing by taking vitamin pills, extra calcium, could be deactivating the biological activity of the vitamin D. So we want high-dose D, a higher amount of D, and a lower amount of calcium. We want most of your calcium to come from food, like vegetables and seeds, not from supplements. So again, how much vitamin D to take? The Institute of Medicine recommends 600 IUs a day. I say that's too little. That doesn't give you the ideal range in your blood. I think they're too conservative. I'm recommending people take around 2,000 a day if they're not getting a lot of sun. The Vitamin D Council recommends about 5,000 a day, and they recommend the blood level of 25-hydroxy vitamin D be between 50 and 80, and I'm concerned that may be too much. So right now I'm suggesting that my guidelines are right in the middle of these two authorities to go for that center range of vitamin D supplementation and vitamin D blood levels. The other things about supplements are important too, because making sure you have adequacy, and the word I call comprehensive nutrient adequacy. It means you're not low on anything. You have everything you're supposed to have in your body. And one thing you're supposed to have is those long-chain omega-3 fats called EPA and DHA. We want to make sure that people eat foods like flax seeds and walnuts to get the levels of omega-3 fats. The EPA and DHA, people think of that as fish oil because fish is a common source of EPA and DHA, but the body can make a lot of what it needs by getting it right from the omega-3 fat, like the flax seeds and the walnuts. It can make the DHA and the EPA from that. And you can also get vegan DHA that's available today. So it doesn't have to always come from fish. The concern here is that as you're eating too much fish, maybe because of the pollution in fish, shows an increased risk of breast cancer in some studies. And too much fish could drive your protein levels too high. That can have negative effects. So we're talking here about making sure you have adequate DHA, but you only need a little bit. You don't need to have a lot of DHA. Your body only needs a little bit of extra. Just like zinc. We want to have enough zinc in our diet as well. We want to have foods like pumpkin seeds, right? We want to have people have zinc adequacy. In some studies show that a little bit of zinc supplementation can halve the cancer mortality rate. We want to make sure people aren't deficient in zinc, but nor do you want to take too much. So maybe a supplement of zinc if your diet's not ideal, but if you're eating very healthfully and eating pumpkin seeds and seeds and a lot of green vegetables, then you perhaps wouldn't need the zinc supplementation. So let me review here. Let's go over this again, because we're saying you have the power to control your health destiny. And that includes, we have the information today. Nutritional science has advanced to the point where we can win the war on cancer. And it's not going to happen with more money going to the drug companies looking for a magic pink pill we could take. It's going to happen because people have to change the way they live. And we have to keep studying, keep looking at the research, and instructing people how they can apply modern nutritional science in their kitchen to live a long, healthy, and pleasurable life. So again, to review and to recap here, you want to especially avoid processed meats and red meats and barbecue meats and luncheon meats. Those are the most dangerous, right? You want to keep in mind that too much dairy products, even low-fat dairy, could increase the risk of prostate cancer in men and ovarian cancer in women. We want to keep in mind that fried foods are not healthy foods. Fried foods form acrylamides, and especially when we cook foods at high temperatures, they're dangerous foods. And also, we want to avoid anything that's white, right? White flour, white sugar, white rice. And if you look on a package and it says wheat flour means white flour. It has to say whole wheat flour. So the word whole wheat has to be the first ingredients. The fountain of youth, your solution to medical care crisis in America, is to eat a variety of high nutrient foods. To remember GOMS, G-O-M-B-S, greens, onions, mushrooms, berries, beans, and seeds. Don't overeat. Eat when you're hungry. When you're eating healthy foods, it connects you back to your true hunger again. Don't be deficient in things, but don't overtake supplements either. You can take a multivitamin, you can take a little extra zinc, iodine, B12, vitamin D, but don't overdo the antioxidants. Get that from real food. Don't supplement with vitamin A. Don't supplement with beta-carotene. Don't take huge amounts of vitamin E. Limit unhealthy food. Don't stuff yourself and eat lightly, but eat heavily of the foods that are low in calories. The secret to not wanting processed foods and not wanting to overeat anymore is to fill up your volume with lots of low-calorie, high-nutrient foods. Eat lots of raw vegetables. Eat lots of green vegetables. Eat all those foods we're talking about that give you dramatic protection against cancer. Now, before we close, I'd like to give you two examples of women who had advanced cancer. Two women in my practice. Now, I'm not saying this happens to everybody, but look at what did happen here, because this is an eye-opener, because I didn't think this could happen. And so it surprised and shocked even me. So Pam had metastatic ovarian cancer with fluid in her belly and her lung. She was told she had less than a year to live. And she's alive now, 14 years later, and has no cancer, right? Lee Gerstead, I met Lee Gerstead. She had an abnormal bone scan showing that she had breast cancer that had already spread throughout her whole body into her bones. And she adopted what we're talking about today, this high-nutrient diet style. And the subsequent bone scan, the follow-up, showed her cancer disappeared. I couldn't even believe it could happen. And I still can't believe it could happen a lot, but it happened. You know, the point I'm making is that you never think that it's too late. If you're living, you know, when is it too late to change your health to excellent health habit? When is it too late? Well, when you're in the coffin, it's too late. But if you're still alive, it's not too late. Because if you're still alive, don't underestimate the miraculous self-healing powers of the human body. Because what the human body can do at times is simply miraculous. All right, so I'm wishing you all fantastic health. I'm wishing you incredible health. I'm wishing you to have that attitude about life that you can control your health destiny. And no matter what you've accomplished in life so far, you can have a healthy and happy later life. And as you get older, you can have your full vibrancy, your full mental faculties, and free of medical tragedies. So wishing you a long, happy, and pleasurable life. I know it can be yours. I know you can have it. Thank you.